is where I want to pick up. Chapter 19.
What page are you on?
In mine, it's 195. Yeah, I know. Some of them have the same covers, but I don't think it's quite the same pagination.
This one's 160.
It's this one.
Okay.
Actually, read this one.
It's the first page. I'll just say that. Among the tales of sorrow and of ruin that come down to us from the darkness of those days, there are yet some in which amid weeping there is joy, and under the shadow of death light that endures. Again, it's like language right out of the fairy story essay, where Tolkien says, you know that on callow lumpish youth, sorrow, peril, and the shadow of death can bestow dignity and several other things. Okay. Of these histories most fair, still in the ears of the elves, is the tale of Beren and Luthien. Of their lives was made the lay of Luthien, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then there's a bunch of background kind of stuff that I'm going to skip. And we have Beren kicked out of his homeland and essentially, and he wanders around until several pages in. About 7 pages or so. No, I take that back. Sorry, I went too far. About 5 pages. Beren somehow, and we're never really told how, is able to make his way into the defended realm of Goliath. Okay, and I say it's defended because Thingol, the elf, and Melian, the Maya, his wife, live there, and she has woven, we're told, this shroud of secrecy around it. And it's supposed to stop anybody from getting in. But apparently it's got a Beren-sized hole, so to speak, okay, so that he can get through. And we're told that he stumbles his way in, and he's bowed as with many years of woe, so great had been the torment of the road, etc., etc. And he gets there, and right in the middle of that paragraph that begins with, it is told in the lay of Luthien that Beren came stumbling into Doriath. We're told, wandering in the summer in the woods of Neldoreth, he came upon Luthien, daughter of Thingol and Melian, at a time of evening under moonrise, as she danced upon the unfading grass in the glades before Esgalduin. Then all memory of his pain departed from him, and he fell into an enchantment. Why does he fall into an enchantment? What has he just witnessed? Think of the fairy story essay.
Is she forming like a ceremony in nature?
No, she's just out there.
Dancing.
She's a flower child. She's just out there singing like some hippie in love with the woods.
Well, her mother was just in her mere presence powerful enough to make Elway stop cold for a couple of centuries. If she inherited any of this, surely just her mere presence would be enough to knock a mortal off his feet.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
Was it something he's never seen before? Someone dancing? I mean,
Well,
her
that's-
particularly happened.
It's a fairy in drama. In other words, he is seeing an elf maiden, actually an elf / goddess. I mean, dad's an elf, mom's a goddess, essentially. He is seeing her sing and dance, and we're told he's enchanted. Okay, that's the exact same word Tolkien uses in the fairy story essay to describe what happens to someone who sees a fairy in drama. They are enchanted. They take what they see as being completely, totally, 100% real. Now, the difference being, obviously, with us, we don't live in this world. Or at least not anymore. We don't live in this world. Okay? This is our world. Arda is Earth. Everything that happens in The Lord of the Rings does happen on this planet. It's just a long, long, long time ago. Okay? So, He falls into an enchantment because we're told Luthien was the most beautiful of all the children of Iluvatar. And we get the description of her hair and eyes and all that kind of stuff. She vanishes from his sight. He loses his speech. Okay. And he just kind of wanders around in the woods for a while. But she comes back. And Luthien dances again upon a green hill, and suddenly she begins to sing. Keen, heart-piercing was her song, as the song of the lark that rises from the gates of night and pours its voice among the dying stars, seeing the sun behind the walls of the world. And the song of Luthien released the bonds of winter, the frozen water spoke, flowers sprang forth, and the spell breaks. So the spell on Beren is like the coming of winter. Just as winter freezes up the water, it freezes up the land. Okay? The first coming of Luthien to Beren freezes his mouth, freezes his tongue. The second coming of Luthien takes the spell off of him. And he calls to her. She halts in wonder. They look at each other. It's kind of like love at first sight. Okay? And we're told in the next page, or possibly the same page in yours, that Beren isn't the only one that loves her. Daron the minstrel. In other words, someone whose power is in his tongue. Okay? Beren first sees her, he gets tongue-tied. He can't say anything. Daron is someone whose ability is entirely in his tongue. He falls in love with her, okay, and he sees Beren and Luthien out in the woods. And so he goes and tells Thingol. So Beren is brought to Thingol, and the king asks him, "Who are you that come hither as a thief and unbidden dare to approach my throne?" All right? Come as a thief. Beren doesn't say anything. So Luthien stands up for him. Luthien stands, really I think it's safe to say, in front of him, protecting him. And she says, he's Beren, son of Barahir, lord of men, mighty foe of Morgoth, the tale of whose deeds has become a song even among the elves. Right? That's her way of saying, don't belittle him because we even sing songs of his father. Okay? Thingol, let Beren speak. If he's so mighty, he can speak for himself. What would you hear, unhappy mortal? The word would, we use it entirely only as what's called a modal auxiliary. It helps us form other tenses, present, future tense of the verb and such. Okay? Tolkien's using it in its old Anglo-Saxon meaning wish or desire. And here it's past tense. So, what desired you? What wished you? What did you want, here mortal? And for what cause have you left your own land to enter this, which is forbidden to such as you? Now, if I were Beren, I would take up the second part first and say, I didn't know it was forbidden. I didn't see a forbidden to Beren sign. It didn't stop me from coming in. So he says, my fate led me here. Well, the elves understand something about fate. Through perils such as few even of the elves would dare. He speaks, if you're familiar with Lord of the Rings, he speaks like another character in Lord of the Rings whose name starts with B. Boromir. When Boromir gets to Elrond's house, he brags about how far he's gone to get there. And then Aragorn stands up and says, sit down, kid. You don't know distance. I've been all the way, and he talks about having, essentially circumnavigated the globe. Okay? So he says, and here I found what I sought not indeed, but finding I would possess forever. For it is above all gold and silver, beyond all jewels, neither rock nor steel, nor the fires of Morgoth, nor all the powers of the elf kingdoms shall keep from me the treasure that I desire. What does that kind of sound like?
Sounds like Fenor.
Sounds a little bit like Fëanor. Sounds like an oath, like he's swearing something. Neither, this nor that nor this nor that is going to stop me from getting what I want. And she's right there. For Luthien, your daughter is the fairest of all the children of the world. Okay, Thingol's smart enough to know that what he means is, I want Luthien, and nothing will stop me. Everyone kind of goes, oops, Beren's a dead man. Shouldn't have said that. But Thingol speaks slowly. Why?
Is it because they're getting into oath talk, like they're getting almost to
Partially.
they want to make sure that he's clear on what the terms are going to be.
You're going to make sure terms of negotiation, et cetera, are very clear. That's part of it.
Didn't he promise not to kill him?
Okay. What was that?
Didn't he promise his daughter not to kill him or imprison him?
Yeah, he swore an oath to her that he would neither slay Beren nor imprison him. Have you ever been so angry before that you really had to bite your tongue and make sure that what you said very slowly and very clearly so that it was heard, rather than just yelling at the top of your lungs, in which case nobody's going to pay any attention to you? That, I think, is what's going on. I think Thingol is so stunned, so amazed, and full of anger that this mere human would think that he, Thingol, is going to allow him, the mere human, to marry his daughter. Death you have earned with these words. And death you should find suddenly, had I not sworn an oath in haste. In other words, if I hadn't sworn to my daughter that you'd be safe, you'd be dead now. Of which I repent, base-born mortal. Well, what does that tell us about Thingolian attitudes towards humans? You have the same problems in Middle Earth as you have in Harry Potter's Earth, as you have in our Earth. Problems of racism. That's exactly what this is. We're elves. We're the high and mighty. We live forever. We're better looking than humans, which they are. We're taller than humans, which generally they are. Okay? We're wiser than you. We have better voices than you. We can shoot bows and arrows better than you. We do everything better than you, and you die. You don't. Okay? That's why he calls them base-born mortal. Who in the realm of Morgoth has learnt to creep in secret as his spies and thralls. Oh, more guilt by association. He's essentially saying, you come from the realm of Morgoth like a spy or thrall, like a spy or a slave. Which of it are you? Beren. Finally he speaks. Or speaks more, I should say. Death you can give me earned or unearned. In other words, you can kill me, whether I've earned it or not. But the names I will not take from you of baseborn, nor spy, nor thrall. In other words, them's fighting words. By the ring of Felagund that he gave to Berehir, and we didn't talk about Felagund, but you've read the story, so you know what he's talking about. That he gave to Berehir my father on the battlefield of the north, my house has not earned such names from any elf, be he king or no. Well, who is Felagund?
Finrod, Galadriel's brother, son of Finarfin.
Big dude, in other words.
Yeah.
Powerful, important. You could make the claim, I think, of a more kingly line than Thingol. After all, what has Thingol never seen?
Actually, he has. They brought him over. They brought the three of them over, and then they brought him back so they bring the
That's
toys with them.
That's right. but he didn't stay.
No.
Okay, so Thingol hasn't really partaken of the blessed realm.
No, he went there on vacation for a week.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like Pop to Soma went off to the reservation and came back. Okay, so he hasn't experienced life among the blessed, the Valar, the way Felagund did. Okay, or Finarfin, or Galadriel, or
Well, and Felagund, he like sacrificed himself to Sauron, so that somebody, I think it was Beor or Barrier or somebody. That's
self-sacrificed. Okay, keep that in mind. You know,
or no, he does that later.
if you get a version of this that is illustrated, I ought to bring this in one day. Version illustrated by Ted Naismith. Okay, Ted Naismith is a fantastic Tolkien illustrator, and I think he's got as one of his illustrations is the image. I'm pretty sure it's Felagund. A Felagund chained to the rock. You know, it's the old. It's not Prometheus. Or is it Prometheus?
Yeah, Prometheus got chained. And
Yeah, chained to the rock and has his liver eaten out, you know. It grows back and the eagle comes and eats it again. It's essentially that image. And it's a pretty good image. Okay? And so when he swears by Felagund's name, he's like, up me that name. Come on. Let's do this one upping. Let's see you try to one up that. Okay? And when he swears by the ring, what does he mean? Yeah, this ring. Okay? His words were proud, all eyes looked upon the ring, for he held it high aloft. The green jewels gleamed there that the Noldor had devised in Valinor. For this ring was like to twin serpents, whose eyes were emeralds, their heads met beneath a crown of golden flowers, that the one upheld and the other devoured. That was the badge of Finarfin in his house. Then Melian leaned into Thingol's side and does what, essentially? Smart woman here, smart wife.
She says don't accept the challenge.
For not by you shall Beren be slain, and far and free does his fate lead him in the end, yet it is wound with yours. All of that is prologue to what she's really telling him. Take heed. In other words, she tells her husband, be careful. You're on thin ice here. Okay? Thingol looked in silence upon Luthien, and we're told he thinks in his heart. He doesn't say this. Unhappy men, children of little lords and brief kings. Shall such as these lay hands on you and yet live? Well, I think it's probably safe to say that by this time, they already have laid hands on Luthien. And then he says, I see the ring, son of Barrier. I perceive that you are proud and deem yourself mighty. You deem yourself mighty. What's he not accept? That Beren is mighty. But a father's deeds, even had his service been rendered to me. That is, yeah. Your father might have earned a great name for himself. But you? I don't know you from Billy Bob. Okay? Got to make the name alliterate with Barrier. Even had his service been rendered to me, avail not to win the daughter of Thingol and Melian. See, I too desire treasure that is withheld. So we are going to have a bit of comparison of one-upping. Okay, you got a nice pretty ring there. Well, there's something I want. What? Go your way, therefore, bring to me in your hand a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown. And then, if she will, Luthien may set her hand in yours. Then you shall have my jewel. And though the fate of Arda lie within the Silmarils, yet you shall hold me generous. Okay, what did his wife just tell him? Be careful. And what does he immediately do?
He makes it. Just bounce off.
spouts off. I was just teaching Henry IV Part 1 to my Shakespeare class. He's like Hotspur. He just rushes in. He just jumps right in. Doesn't think what he's saying. Because in saying those words, what does he tie himself immediately to? The oath of Fëanor. Okay? Anybody who comes between me and a Silmaril, me and my family and my family's family and my family's family, to umpteenth generations, will hunt you down until we claim that Silmaril back. Okay? Thus he wrought the doom of Doriath, and was ensnared within the curse of Mandos. What prompts Thingol to do that? It's a word he uses against Beren. It's pride. It's pride.
Also, it's kind of like the little wizard sends them off to get the witch's broomstick. It's like, okay, this will get rid of them. We're good.
Okay.
He thinks it's an unattainable quest, right?
He thinks it's an unattainable quest. Okay? But when he says, here's what I really want. I want the Silmaril. That's an act of pride. Who is worthy of a Silmaril? Anybody? Is Fëanor? No. Manwë? Yes. Valinor? Yes. After all, could Fëanor have made the Silmarils had it not been for the light of the two trees?
No.
No. And yet Fëanor thinks of himself as a creator, not a sub-creator. Okay? So Thingol ties himself into the web, let's say. And we're told those that heard these words perceived that Thingol would save his oath and yet send Beren to his death. For they knew not that all the power of the Noldor, before the siege was broken, had availed even to see from afar the shining Silmarils of Fëanor. For they were set in the Iron Crown, treasured in Angband above all wealth. Balrogs were about them, and countless swords. In other words, they're well guarded. And Beren laughs. He doesn't just sit there. He laughs to Thingol's face. For little price do elven kings sell their daughters. It's like, really? You want a cherry on top of that? Because, man, I'd have given you at least 2 Silmarils for her, For gems and things made by craft. In other words, anything made by craft, according to Beren's way of thinking, it's just a bauble. Bauble. Okay? It's really nothing. It's unimportant. What should earn a daughter's hand in Beren's mind?
Great deeds.
How about actions? Okay? Actions.
I
But-
think maybe even further than that, he would have respected Thingol more if he had attempted to kill him rather than give his daughter or to go to battle. I thought that was more likely that they would actually have to fight out over it.
Yeah, I agree entirely. But to say here, you give me this in exchange for this? I mean, what has Thingol said about his daughter? She's the greatest thing in Arda. Oh, except for Silmaril, because that's an even Steven exchange. Okay?
He did say even that was generous, though, in his defense.
That's true. But if this be your will, Thingol, I will perform it. And when we meet again, my hand shall hold the Silmaril from the Iron Crown. For you have not looked the last upon Beren, son of Beren. And then he looked in the eyes of Melian, who spoke not. He bade farewell to Luthien, bowing. He leaves. And Melian says, now you did it. Okay. O king, you have devised cunning counsel. But if my eyes have not lost their sight, it's our way of saying, told you so, it is ill for you whether Beren fail in this errand or achieve it, for you have doomed either your daughter or yourself. And now is Dariath drawn within the fate of a mightier realm. In other words, and now I can't protect us anymore. Because you've now linked our fate to the fate of other places. Whereas before, we were isolated. Nobody paid any attention. Melkor / Morgoth didn't care about us. But now, like Sauron looking for the ring, he's going to be seeking. Okay? Thingol, I sell not to elves or men those whom I love and cherish above all treasure. Does he really cherish her above all treasure? No, because he just said, bring me this treasure and she's yours. I mean, it's like the adage about prostitution. A rich man proposes to a woman, how much will it take for you to sleep with me? $100, $1,000, $1 million. And if she says, oh, well, it'll be $1 million, okay? And then he starts to bid her down. And she replies, I'm not a whore. He says, madam, I think we've established that. Now we're merely haggling on price. That's, I hear somebody's phone vibrating. Yeah, that's okay. I thought it was mine over here. And so, he's already said he'd give her for treasure. And if there were hope or fear that Beren should come ever back alive to Minorgoth, he should not have looked again upon the light of heaven, though I had sworn it. In other words, he is saying, I don't have any hope whatsoever he'll come back. Because if I did, he would have broken his oath. He would have killed Beren before. So what's he doing? Or what does he think he's doing to Beren? Sending him off to his death. And not breaking his oath. In other words, he's killing him by forcing Beren to commit suicide, essentially. This is the, modern equivalent of that is suicide by cop. You want to kill yourself, but you're not, quote unquote, man enough to do it, so you go and you point a gun at an officer. They'll do it for you, rather than die themselves. Okay? So Beren goes out. And he seeks help. He meets with Felagund. Okay? And Felagund knew him, we're told. He didn't need the ring to recognize him, because he could recognize Beren, the son of Beor and Barahir in Beren's face. And Felagund, I hate these names. Felagund speaks to his people, recalls the deeds of Beren's father, and then Celegorm stands up. Okay, now when Felagund speaks the deeds of Beren's father, he's probably also alluded to what Beren's quest is. Does Felagund know about the oath? Yes. I mean Feanor's oath. But just in case he doesn't, Celegorm stands up, son of Curufin, I believe. This is the nice thing about the names. They do alliterate father, son, etc. on down the line. And so Celegorm stands up. Be he friend or foe, whether demon of Morgoth, or elf, or child of men, or any other living thing in Arda, neither law, nor love, nor league of hell, nor might of the valor. It's like he's channeling St. Paul, talking about neither thrones, nor power, nor principalities, etc. It probably is where Tolkien gets it from. Nor any power of wizardry shall defend him from the pursuing hate of Feanor's sons, if he take or find a Silmaril and keep it. For the Silmarils we alone claim until the world ends. Well, that just doesn't set things off on a good beginning. Okay? So, Felagund, skipping a couple paragraphs, sees that he's forsaken takes from his head the crown of Nargothrond, sets it on his feet, and essentially says, I'm done. Fine. You can break your oaths to me, but I must hold my bond. If there be any on whom the shadow of our curse has not yet fallen, I should find at least a few to follow me. And Edrahil comes forward and says, you're my king. And Felagund gives the crown to his brother. So Felagund and Beren set off with their 10 companions. Total of 12. And they make their way and they come to Sauron's little fortress of Angband. I say little only in relation to Utumno, Morgoth. And Felagund sings against Sauron. Well, this isn't very manly. I mean, they're singing. It's like a contest to see who has the better voice. Okay? But how is the world brought into being? Song. So what is the power of song in Tolkien's Middle Earth? It's not necessarily magic. Okay?
Old time songs are the mightier songs.
What does Luthien's song do to Beren?
Enchanted.
It enchants him. Later on, fairly soon, we're going to see what does Luthien's song do to Morgoth? Puts him to sleep. Okay? So there is power in song. There is power to perform actions. Sometimes the song itself performs the action. Okay? The singing of the Ainur. And then Eru just says, look what you've sung. And they see it and it's brought into being. Okay? So we see Felagund contest his will against Sauron. But Sauron is the stronger. Why? He's a Maya. They're elves. Sauron is, to use the word properly, supernatural. Because Felagund is natural. Elves are natural. They're tied to nature, the world of their birth. Sauron is not. Yes, Sauron can have a human form, or as we will see briefly, a werewolf form, or a vampire form. He's a shapeshifter. Okay? But he is not the form. Which is why, in The Lord of the Rings, when the ring is destroyed, does Sauron merely drift apart? No. When Saruman is destroyed, does he merely drift apart? No. His spirit leaves. It goes somewhere, okay, but it does leave. So we have the singing contest. And Beren gets cast into the pit. And Luthien, realizing that nobody's going to come help them, Luthien comes, and I'm skipping a bunch. Celegorm, she comes to, but he won't help. But Huan, the hound, probably why it's Huan, does. And he's the greatest wolfhound in Middle-earth, we're told. And he leaves Celegorm and comes to Luthien. Okay? And he helps Luthien. Let's see here. Let's get a bunch again. And now the only two that are left in Sauron's dungeons, let's say, are Beren and Felagund. The other 10 have all died. Let's see here. In the paragraph that begins, in the pits of Sauron, Beren and Felagund lay, all their companions were now dead. Felagund dies, and in the next paragraph, Luthien comes. and she sings. Beren sings, Luthien hears his voice, and Sauron sends a wolf, and Huan comes and kills it. Sauron sends another one, and Huan kills it, etc. And finally, Sauron takes the form of a wolf, and Huan pins him down. Okay? Sauron yields. Luthien takes the mastery of the Isle. Gotta get the names right. Beren, sorry, I'm really tired. Beren is rescued, and Felagund is buried. Okay? So what do? Beren and Luthien are now free. So they go and they walk off in the woods together. They're free, but they're not. How do I put this? They're free, but they're not free. That is, they're not free to be wed, for example. Okay? Because Beren hasn't fulfilled his oath. So Nargothrond is overthrown and such. And Beren and Luthien get separated again, and then they come back and find each other again. And they make their way to Utumno. I actually want to pick up with the paragraph that begins. It's after this little song is sung, farewell, sweet earth and northern sky, forever blessings here did lie, blah, 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 blah. It's several paragraphs after that that begins, their dismay took them. Is that what I want? Yeah. Luthien has made herself look like the winged fell of Thuringwethel, and she's made Beren look like Draugluin. And we find out that Morgoth chose one from among the whelps of the race of Draugluin, fed him with his own hand upon living flesh, put his power upon him. Swiftly the wolf grew, and he names him Karkaroth. And he has a variety of other names. The Red Maw, and Fauglier, the Jaws of Thirst, And then you could go all Princess Bride and come up with a whole bunch of, other names if you wanted to. And he set Anfauglier before the doors of Anne to stop Huan. And Karkaroth sees them coming. Okay? And Luthien puts them to sleep. They make their way down. And they're actually able to get the Silmaril. Notice, Beren can take the Silmaril, and what does it not do? Why?
It took it rightfully.
That's about the only answer that you can have. Because the gods smiled upon him. Because Manwë said, no, this one's worthy. He can touch it without it burning. Because anybody else who tries to hold the Silmaril, what will happen? It burns their hands. Okay? So how come they don't escape scot-free?
Because of the knife breaks or because of the werewolf?
The first. It's not that well, let me back up again. Yeah, a piece of the knife does break. Okay? Falls down, but when it breaks, what happens to it? It's not just that it's a cold piece of metal, it plops down onto Morgoth. It's hot. Almost like it's melting. Little Beowulfian image here. When Beowulf strikes Grendel's body with the sword that he finds in Grendel's lair after he kills Grendel's mother, strikes Grendel's body, and then the sword starts to melt. Well, a shard of the sword falls on Morgoth, and he awakes. Okay? Then terror fell upon Beren and Luthien. And they fled, heedless and without disguise, desiring only to see the light once more. Now you have to understand when this happens. Who is Morgoth to Beren and Luthien? And when I ask who is Morgoth, what I mean there is not relationship, but what is he in terms of power and strength and all that kind of stuff?
He's a god.
The biggest, worst badass in all of creation.
Satan. Okay? Not some guy with the pitchfork and the goat's tail and the little horns. Okay? But think Satan incarnate. And he's angry at you. And they kind of realize, oops. And so they're trying to get away. So Beren strides in front of Luthien. Really? Who's more powerful? By 100-fold. Luthien's got a lot more than Beren does. Okay? But Beren strides in front of her. He holds the Silmaril. Karkaroth halts. And Beren says, "Here is a fire that shall consume you and all evil things." And he thrust the Silmaril before the eyes of the wolf. And he looked upon that holy jewel and was not daunted. The devouring spirit within him awoke to sudden fire. The devouring spirit. Okay? And gaping, he took suddenly the hand within his jaws. He bit it off at the wrist. Then swiftly all his inwards were filled with a flame of anguish, and the Silmaril seared his accursed flesh, and he flees. Beren's in a swoon. Death is nigh. Luthien sucks the venom out of his hand, arm. And it's kind of disgusting because what does she do? She put her whole mouth over his wrist and just starts, because, Okay. Hosts of Morgoth were awakened. The quest of the Silmaril was like to have ended in ruin and despair. But 3 mighty birds arrive. Sound like anything?
The Hobbit.
The Hobbit? The eagles are coming. The eagles are coming more than once. They rescue Bilbo and the dwarves from the wargs, first of all. And then they rescue, essentially, the Battle of 5 Armies when the eagles come. And then, again, the very end of The Lord of the Rings, Frodo and Sam sitting there on the top of Mount Doom. The eagles come again. The eagles come and they rescue Gandalf from Isengard. And then they rescue Gandalf again from the top of Mount Careth. So why are the eagles?
Manwë.
So what does that tell us? Is Manwë, the deist god, just out in the universe, winding his watches, spinning them off into space? No. He's very much present. He has an eye as to what is going on in Middle-earth. Okay? So they lift up Luthien and Beren from the earth. They bore them aloft in the clouds. They take them away. Okay? And it's springtime again. Beren still only has one hand. It's not like Luke Skywalker. He doesn't get to go in the magical bath or whatever. Boop, have a new hand attached. Okay? And finally, they make their way back to Doriath. Beren the one-handed. Okay? And Luthien. But we're told, upon Doriath evil days had fallen. In other words, Thingol gets his comeuppance. Grief and silence had come upon all his people when Luthien was lost. Long they sought for her. Okay. Thingol turned to Melian. We're told in the next paragraph, but now she withheld her counsel from him. Why? Saying that the doom that he had devised must work to its appointed end, and that he must wait now upon time. What does she mean? The doom that he had devised must work to its appointed end.
Well, he set fate in motion, he tied himself to that fate, it's gotta work out.
Okay, keep in mind, what is Melian? what was Melian before she came down into Arda? She was an Ainur, but she was a lower one. But she was still an Ainur. So what did she take part in? Singing. Okay? So she saw, she sees, she knows how some of the story ends. And she says, I warned you. Now, what? She can't intervene. Because he has wound his clock and thrown it out. And now that clock must keep on ticking until its appointed end.
So do they see what interaction they have, what their actions are, or just what is laid out? And not what they have to do with it?
It's a good question. Because I think when they see the vision, I don't think they see themselves going down into Middle Earth. But they see essentially Middle Earth from its beginning to its end. So they have to see something of their
But I thought
involvement.
each part was revealed to them,
Yeah,
but the extent of that part.
it's probably a good example of why Tolkien never published this. I mean, he never finished it.
It says that it gets hazy around that time that men come around. And they see at the end, but there's a large chunk of
Yeah,
evidence
because
that-
I mean, Eru does tell them, they don't know what happens to men. Okay, and man's fate is not wrapped up with the fate of Middle Earth or the fate of the world in Arda, the way other creatures are, and even elves isn't necessarily. But even the elves' fate is somewhat determined. And only humans is completely, totally free. Okay? So I think what she is saying here is, she knows some of what's going to happen, but she doesn't know it all. But she's essentially saying when he turns to her for counsel, I gave you my counsel.
You will.
You didn't listen. Now you have to what? As every one of us does. You got to bear the consequences of whatever your actions are. Okay? So, Thingol learns that Luthien had journeyed far from Doriath, etc. They come back. And we're told in that dark hour, Beren and Luthien returned, hastening from the west. Okay? The news of their coming is sorrowful. And Beren comes before Thingol, leading Luthien, whom we're told Thingol had thought dead. But he loved him not. That is, Thingol loved Beren not, because of the woes that he had brought upon Doriath. Did Beren bring the woes upon Doriath? Yeah, kind of. I mean, he and Luthien went to Nargothrond. Felagund left. Kind of the city of Nargothrond broke apart after that. Okay. And after they left Morgoth opened up all of his, host that are now rampaging on the northern borders of Doriath.
Bad news does seem to follow Beren pretty much wherever he goes.
Kind of like Gandalf's Stormcrow. Yeah. But he loved him not because of the woes that he had brought upon Doriath. But Beren knelt before him and said, I return according to my word. I'm come now to claim my own. Pardon my language here, but now I won't use that language. Gutsy move, let's say. Because Beren bows before him, says, I fulfilled my oath. Give her to me. I mean, she's right there next to him. They've been together for however long they've been together. What of your quest and of your vow? It is fulfilled. Even now a Silmaril is in my hand. Show it to me. I knew you were going to say that. Find Karkaroth. Beren puts forth his left hand. Slowly opening his fingers. Nothing there. Then he holds up his right arm. See? No hand. Okay. Then Luthien's mood was softened. Then Thingol's mood was softened. And Beren sat before his throne upon the left, and Luthien upon the right, and they told all the tale of the quest. In other words, when Luthien, Beren, Thingol, when Thingol sees that Beren lost his hand in the quest, his heart is softened because he sees Beren has given something. Has he given us all? Not yet. And they're filled with amazement. And it seemed to Thingol that this man was unlike all other mortal men. And among the great in Arda. What does that mean, among the great? Like me. Thingol. Like Felagund. Like Finrod. Like Finarfin. Like Galadriel. Like. And the love of Luthien, a thing new and strange. And he perceived that their doom might not be withstood by any power of the world. Nothing would come between them. And he's right. He's finally right. He's finally learned. Therefore, at the last, he yielded his will, and Beren took the hand of Luthien before the throne of her father. Not literally. Just, sorry, bad joke. Shadow falls upon the Doriath. Karkaroth comes into Doriath. They're off hunting him. And finally, as they're out, Huan leaves their side. They hear a great baying. Huan kills Karkaroth. And sorry, skipped a part. Beren and Karkaroth fight first. They fought to the death, but Thingol gave no heed, for he knelt by Beren, etc. Beren was bit at the breast by Karkaroth. Huan then jumps him, and we're told. Huan in that hour slew Karkaroth, but there in the woven woods of Doriath his own doom, long spoken, was fulfilled, and he was wounded mortally, and the venom of Morgoth entered into him. Then he came, and falling beside Beren, spoke for the third time with words. He bade Beren farewell before he died. Beren spoke not, laid his head upon the hand of the hound, laid his hand upon the head of the hound, man. And so they parted, okay? Why do you think Tolkien includes this? What's this an image of? What are dogs supposed to be? Man's best friend. And if you're a hunter, dogs are especially useful. I think this is one way that Tolkien, ties in to the Silmarillion part of what he says in the fairy story essay. What is one of the oldest desires? Tolkien says there. To speak with creatures unlike ourselves. And here we have had Beren speak with Huan 3 times. In other words, this is an old ancient desire that does get fulfilled within the context of this particular story. We're not going to get to Turambar. But if we did, we would have something else speak there. Anybody remember what? Sword. The sword. Okay. Jump to the Lord of the Rings, and what do we see speaking? Other than the ring. If it is the ring. Trees. Okay? Trees. We don't see rocks unless you take Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli jumping up from their overcloaks, the riders on Rowan and such. So, Beren is aroused by the touch of the Silmaril. He holds it aloft, and he hands it to Thingol. Now is the quest achieved, and my doom full wrought. And he dies. Or he at least spoke no more. How's that for a euphemism? Rather than, somebody dies, and you don't say they died. You say, they spoke no more. Vow of poverty, silence or something. So what happens to Beren?
He hangs around, the spirit hangs around where Luthien is.
She's not there yet, okay, but they take him back, and we're told the starlight was quenched, darkness had fallen even upon Luthien to Nuvio, thus ended the quest of the Silmaril, but the lay of Luthien, translated into our tongue, released from bondage, does not end. For the spirit of Beren, at her bidding, tarried in the halls of Mandos. How does that figure?
You can't do that.
He's not an elf. What is supposed to happen to humans when they die?
They'll know.
They go beyond the confines of the world. Okay? And yet Beren is somehow enabled to stick around a little bit.
Well, it's because of Luthien's power, right? Because at her bidding.
But how can she know?
He's
Well, I think all that at her bidding means is at her request. Like, don't leave me.
He's also not supposed to touch Silmaril.
Well, that's true, also. So he tarries in the halls of Mandos, unwilling to leave the world. Now, I don't think Tolkien knew anything about, quote unquote, near-death experiences. But you can read all kinds of accounts, all kinds of stories of people who, quote unquote, die. Heart stops, brainwave stops, everything stops. And they're dead for 5, 10, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, and then suddenly they're back. Okay? And if you read some of these accounts, what some of the people will say is, I wasn't ready to go. Or something held me back. Like there was a string. Many of the accounts of people say, I wanted to go. They did see the proverbial light and all that kind of stuff. They wanted to go, but somebody was holding them back. Okay? I think that's what's going on with Beren. Luthien came to say her last farewell upon the dim shores of the outer sea, whence men that die set out never to return. So Beren is off here in the halls of Mandos. Luthien takes the shuttle over to Valinor, goes to the halls of Mandos. Maybe it's just that Beren took a really long time to reach those confines. Luthien goes, and she speaks to him. But the spirit of Luthien fell down into darkness, and at the last it fled. Her body lay like a flower that is suddenly cut off, and lies for a while unwithered on the grass. The spirit of Luthien fell down into darkness, and at last it fled. But her body lies like a flower. What image do we have here?
Fëanor's mother?
Okay. What other image? Popular culture. Think Grimm. Snow White? Sleeping Beauty? Okay. Cinderella? She's physically, her body is alive. Why? Because it looks like a flower that lays unwithered on the grass. How many flowers you know that you cut and you set it on the grass, it doesn't wither? Not many. Then a winter, and as it were the hoar age of mortal men, fell upon Thingol, but Luthien comes to the halls of Mandos. Where are the appointed places of the Eldamir? That is, that's where the elves go when they die. Beyond the mansions of the west, upon the confines of the world. In other words, you go, it's almost like, here's Middle Earth, here's ocean, over here is Valinor, and over here are the halls of Mandos. And this is the confines of the world. So that she's kind of made her way, and they're pretty close now to the confines of the world. Right? And there, in the halls of Mandos, those that wait sit in the shadow of their thought. Those that wait for what? For the elves, those that are waiting to come back over here. But her beauty was more than their beauty, her sorrow deeper than their sorrows, and she knelt before Mandos and sang to him. Now, why does she kneel?
Doesn't hurt.
Doesn't hurt, okay? What is she doing? She's pleading. This is a sign of supplication. This is prayer. O great and mighty Mandos. And the song of Luthien before Mandos was the song most fair that ever in words was woven. And the song was sorrowful that ever the world shall hear. So, the song was fair. It's Tolkien's word for beautiful. He doesn't use the word beautiful very often. He likes fair. Okay? So the song was fair and yet also sorrowful. Why? Other than the context, the immediate context of the story, here's why. Because the Silmarillion, the Hobbit, and the Lord of the Rings are filled throughout with an Anglo-Saxon ideology. Or an Anglo-Saxon ideology is not the best word. An Anglo-Saxon atmosphere where everything is tinged with sadness. It's this notion, this mentality that no matter how good things are in the world, there's always going to be a sadness to them. In other words, for every bright cloud, there's a black lining. Okay? There's always a touch.
Would that go with for every catastrophe, there's a catastrophe?
That's why Tolkien says there. Okay? For every eucatastrophe, there has to be the possibility of discatastrophe. Okay? That's why he says the eucatastrophe really can only work in the face of much evidence to the contrary. His language. Okay? Well, what's the in the face of much evidence to the contrary? It can only bring joy. It can only suggest that there is not universal final defeat. Okay, now what does universal mean? Outside the confines of the world. Okay? It means ultimate. In the great battle of good and evil, evil does not win. Okay, that also means that this is a battle that will have an end. It's not an eternal battle. Tolkien's not a dualist. He's not saying there's a God of good and a God of evil, and they're always battling, and sometimes the God of good gets an upper hand, and sometimes the God of evil gets the upper hand, and it always balances out. The force is always in harmony. That's not Tolkien's mentality at all. Tolkien's mentality is there's a God of good, and then there is evil, which is merely the absence of good, the privation of good. Okay? So, she sings her song, and we're told, unchanged, imperishable, it is still sung in Valinor, beyond the hearing of the world. In listening, the Valar are grieved. They sorrow at this song. For Luthien wove two themes of words, of the sorrow of the Eldar and the grief of men, of the two kindreds that were made by Iluvatar to dwell in Arda, the kingdom of earth amid the innumerable stars. Okay? What do her two themes have to do with the original themes propounded by the Ainur? Remember, Eru gives them the basic score, and they start to sing, and then Melkor goes off the written score and starts adding a bunch of stuff of his own. And Iluvatar raises his hand, and that's what? That's Manwë's theme comes in. And then Iluvatar raises his hand again, and that's something else. He raises his hand a third time, and he stands, and that's the children of Iluvatar. Okay? That's that great ending on that final Beethoven's fifth, chord. And so she weaves these two themes of words, of the elves and men, of the two kindreds that were made by Iluvatar to dwell in art of the kingdom of earth amid the innumerable stars. And as she knelt before him, her tears fell upon his feet like rain upon the stones. Well, what do we all know rain eventually does to stones? It wears them down. And Mandos was moved to pity, who never before was so moved, nor has been since. Why? Because what is Mandos' judgment supposed to be? Permanent, final. Therefore he summoned Beren, and even as Luthien had spoken in the hour of his death, they met again beyond the western sea. She goes off to the halls of Mandos. Beren's not there. He's like right here on the confines. Okay? Mandos summons him. Beren and Luthien meet up again. But Mandos had no power to withhold the spirits of men that were dead within the confines of the world after their time of waiting. What is that? Waiting for what? If it's to go off to Iluvatar, what are they waiting for? This is where I think Tolkien's Catholicism comes in. Purgatory. Because what is purgatory?
Purging the soul.
It's a purging. Okay? The doctrine of purgatory is based upon a variety of passages from both the Old and New Testament and some fathers and such. Okay? Where, the various writings essentially say, you will not come into my presence until the uttermost sin, darkness, spot, etc. is purged away. Okay? That's my best guess as to what that line means. Nor could he change the fates of the children of Iluvatar. In other words, the fates of the children of Iluvatar is men die and leave, elves die and can be reincarnated. Mandos can't change that. But he has leeway. He can stretch out the time that certain things happen. So he goes to Manwe, Lord of the Valar, who governed the world under the hand of Iluvatar. Manwe sought counsel in his inmost thought, where the will of Iluvatar was revealed. In other words, Manwe doesn't have a council of the gods. He turns inwards. He, assumes the lotus position. And what is it Iluvatar wills? And he comes back out of that trance, and he gives Luthien a choice. Because of her labors and her sorrows, she should be released from Mandos and go to Valamar, there to dwell until the world's end among the Valar, forgetting all griefs that her life had known. But Beren can't go there. Not permitted to the Valar to withhold death from him, which is the gift of Iluvatar to men. So that's option A for her. But the other choice was this, that she might return to Middle-earth and take with her Beren, there to dwell again. Well, is this unheard of in later times? Lazarus, come forth. He's been dead. He's been in the grave 4 days. He comes back out. If you take for the purpose of the Gospels. What does that mean? Man, it's really got to suck when you think about it. Lazarus has to die twice. The daughter of Jairus has to die twice. The son of the widow of Nain has to die twice. There's several people that have to die twice. The widow's son that Elijah raises from the dead has to die twice. I mean, I guess it's okay if, you hear how everybody mourned for you the first time, so you can kind of think, okay, at least people are going to miss me the second time around. But
that line where it says, for it was not permitted to the Valar to withhold death from him? I mean, I guess I see them, we're talking about, it's not, they're not Yuvatar.
Exactly.
But, I mean, so it's, I guess the word permitted is throwing me off. So if
Yeah.
they can't or permitted, it would be going against.
They're not permitted by Iluvatar to withhold death. They can't say, sorry, you guys are all going to die, but Paul, you lived a wonderful life, you achieved the Silmaril, you don't have to die.
They can't
Woo.
grant.
They can't overrule Iluvatar's will.
They're more referees than lawmakers.
Exactly. I mean, what did the whole singing of the Ainur prove? No matter what you do, everything works together, as Iluvatar says, according to his will. He's merely paraphrasing Romans 8:28. Okay, just look it up. So she could return to Middle Earth and take Beren, and they could live there for a little while. But notice, without certitude of life or joy. So they could go back to Earth and take what comes. But if she does that, she'll become mortal and subject to a second death, even as he. And when she dies, then she goes off beyond the confines of the world, never to see her kin again. She takes that one, which then opens the door for others. All of the descendants of Beren and Luthien then have that same choice. Because it's like the choice of Luthien gets passed down, I shouldn't use this word, but I'm going to, genetically through them. Okay? So who does that include? Elrond. Okay? Erendil, Elrond's father. Okay? Keep going on down. Arwen, who will make that choice? If you've ever read the appendices to The Lord of the Rings, you find out how long Aragorn lives after he becomes king and all that, and he eventually dies. He's 87 when The Lord of the Rings begins. Excuse me. He's 87. He's either 87 when The Lord of the Rings opens or when Frodo meets him. I think it's when Frodo meets him. So he's old. Okay? He doesn't die for about, I think it's like another 80 or 90 years. Okay. Luthien, she becomes mortal. But that doesn't mean that because she becomes mortal, her life expectancy is immediately, cut short. She becomes mortal like, go back to the book of Genesis. Adam becomes mortal. So how long does Adam live? He's like 800 years. Methuselah, Adam's grandson, 969 years. Okay? And a variety of others live to be in their 900s, etc. And as time goes on, lifespans decline, until the 20th century, and they start to go back up and up and up and up. Okay? So, we're told, this doom she chose, forsaking the blessed realm, putting aside all claim to kingship with those that dwell there. That thus, whatever grief might lie in wait, the fates of Beren and Luthien might be joined. So it was that alone of the Eldalia, she has died indeed, left the world long ago. Alone of the Eldalia, because nobody had done that before in the world of Silmarillion. Now, again, some do after. Arwen's the only one who takes the doom of Luthien.
Is it her doom because she's not going to see her kin? Because she's obviously gained something that was a gift to men, something that was glorious for them.
Doom doesn't have a negative connotation. Doom only means judgment. Comes from the Old English verb.
She's going to miss every
Game on.
Thanksgiving after that forever.
Yeah, which, I don't know, that would be like being in the blessed realm, maybe. No more family get-togethers, pictures. Right? Doom comes from the Old English verb daemon, which simply means to judge. So this is the judgment she accepts. Okay? Now we're going to stop the Silmarillion with this, and here's why. This tale, in one sense, I think you could say it sums up the Silmarillion. Okay? Because it has all of the major themes. What kind of book is this? Is it a novel?
No.
Why not?
Not really a single narrative strand.
Single
Do novels have to have single narrative strands? Anybody ever try to read James Joyce's Ulysses?
Sound and the Fury.
Sound and the Fury? Okay.
I guess because it claims that it's an account by the elves, so it's more like a collection.
It's a
It's a
good.
god.
It's a collection, okay, of tales. What kind of tales? Epic. Are they all epic?
No.
Yeah,
Some more than others.
Okay.
other creation myths.
Use the right word. Myths. That's what this is. Okay? Why do we have myths or myths? What purpose do they serve?
To explain things that are unexplained.
To explain things that are inexplicable. Okay. What else? I mean, are the things that happen here inexplicable?
Unexplained. Like
Or
the
unexplainable?
creation of the earth,
Okay. Creation of the earth.
where the seasons come from.
Downfall of Morgoth? Is that unexplainable? No, it's pretty clear, actually.
But perhaps it explains something.
Okay, it does explain something. Or it adds depth and richness. Okay? Tolkien says in the prologue, or the foreword, which is a foreword, to The Lord of the Rings, that after The Hobbit was published, he wanted to go back to this material. Okay? And he says it was primarily linguistic in origin. And he said, so he sought out the advice of people whose advice he trusted. C.S. Lewis, Charles Williams, Hugo Dyson, other members of the group known as the Inklings, which I'll talk a little bit about later as we go through the semester. And they told him, give it up. Nobody's going to be interested. Okay? Because Tolkien says the interest in creation of this was primarily linguistic. And what he means by that is he had to give a history. He had to give stories. He had to give a culture to the languages he was creating. Because he knew language without a culture is not a language. You don't have a language unless you have a people who speak that language. The people who speak that language don't have a culture until and unless they tell stories in it. Okay? So, these are the stories told in the variety of languages that Tolkien creates. But what purpose do they serve? That is, what purpose do these stories serve?
You could say they serve the same purposes that he elucidates in the essay on fairy stories. Recovery.
Okay. Fantasy, recovery, escape, consolation.
It gives meaning to other stories.
Gives meaning to other stories.
It's where he built the world, it's where he built the realm.
It's all background. This is all backstory for The Lord of the Rings. Essentially, it's all backstory for The Hobbit, which will start on Tuesday. Okay? Now, where do you see this backstory in The Hobbit?
Oh,
Okay, all over?
Oh,
The
the
swords
battle.
and sting came from Gondolin.
Sting comes from Gondolin. Orcrist, Gandalf's sword, comes from Gondolin. Okay.
Elrond himself.
Elrond himself.
The dwarves.
Well, the dwarves that are mentioned. Okay, now pause there for a second. For those of you who are familiar with The Hobbit, think of the elves as they are portrayed here. And then think of the elves that you see in The Hobbit. Not Lord of the Rings.
Well, the elf king was kind of obsessed with like jewels and treasure and that kind of ring.
The Wood Elf King, you mean?
Yeah, the elf king.
Thranduil, I think his name is.
Yeah, and he's kind of like obsessed with gaining these treasures.
Okay.
He has a similar pride.
Okay. The dwarves are full of pride over their treasures. You know, they want to get to the last lonely mountain to get their family inheritance, so to speak.
Well, Bilbo ultimately likes the dwarves, and the elves didn't really like dwarves.
Elves and dwarves can't stand each other.
Right, so you have the history as told by the elves, and then the history is told from Bilbo.
Exactly. You got that antagonism from this world spilling over. But think of when Bilbo arrives at Rivendell. What kind of song do the elves sing?
Tra-la-la-la-la.
Tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la, you know, like a bunch of airhead.
Or elf and elf maiden.
Okay? It is nothing like the elves you see in here. They de-evolved. Okay? Well, why? Totally different genre of story. Not totally different in the sense that one's fantasy and one isn't. No, they're both fantasy. The Hobbit is entirely aimed at whom? Children. Who is this aimed at? Tolkien.
I've often wondered who it was aimed at.
It's aimed at Tolkien. Okay, he never finished this. What you have here is his sons putting together of all the Silmarillion related stories into some kind of complete whole. This is not even the form his father left it in. In fact, he adds stuff to try to make sense of some things. Now, he has since come out with some other material, you know, just 2 or 3 years ago, The Children of Hurin, okay? And there's only one reason why Christopher Tolkien is doing that. He knows there are nerds like me, you know, you publish it, it has the name Tolkien on it, I'll buy it, kind of a thing. I've got it in my office, I'll bring it in on Tuesday. The 12-volume History of Middle-earth,
A friend of mine once said.
which they sent to me for free.
12-volume, oh, you bastard. 12-volume apology for the Silmarils.
Yeah, I mean,